Okay, I got an idea. If you are a computer programmer slash rock climber, specifically like a gym climber, here's my idea for what I think would be the best software assisted rating system for a gym. And I'm not sure exactly how this would be implemented, but here's what the system would be. So, one of the most boring, annoying sort of similarities between indoor climbing and outdoor climbing is people bitching about grades and saying these grades are soft, and then a lot of gyms are overcompensating. These grades are hard, and this is sort of bitching about grades. It's just annoying. And then some gyms like don't do grades at all, and they do big broad spectrums, which I think is a better system, like just colors within a spectrum. But then people complain about that too. Um, and ultimately, I think um, that's like a pretty good system, like something where there's just a spectrum that acknowledges that there's going to be a range. But this would be, I think, the best sort of if you wanted something really useful where if you were doing some sort of training where you wanted, a set of routes at a specific grade, um, and you wanted to just get a sense of is that hard or easy relative to other stuff in the gym. So instead of doing consensus grading, which is almost always going to lead to grade inflation, instead of doing consensus grading where someone says, here's a new problem, I think it is V6, and then everyone votes on it, and then the middle of the bell curve wins on for the grade. Instead of doing that, you have some system, which I guess this would have to be facilitated by an app that basically says, only asks you what you think routes are relative to each other. So you'll climb, and so ideally you would climb two routes, and you would tell it which one you thought was harder. And so the only thing the app cares about is what you think routes are relative to each other. So the end result is as you climb more and more routes, it just basically is able to put all the routes in order in terms of difficulty, and it'll show that to you too. And and the end result, if you have enough data, is that you can then put all the routes together in a line from like 0 to 10, and 10 is just the hardest thing in the gym, and 0 is the easiest thing in the gym, and those grades will always be that. And one way you could do that is when you climb a route, it just asks you to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. But I think, and that would be easier because it would only have to look at one climb. So in the which one is harder system, it has to give you two climbs and know you climb those two climbs. So maybe the first step is you climb something and you rate it on a scale of 0 to 10. Then you climb something else, and then it asks you, do you think that was easier or harder than the last thing? Maybe that's what it is. Just asks you if it was easier or harder than the last route you did. Maybe it's just always asking you to compare it to the previous route, and maybe that very first route, that data is maybe somehow useful just as to kind of establish where you are on the curve. But anyway, that's my system. And for it to work, it has to be not a pain in the ass for people to use. I often like to climb without having my phone on me, so I can see people not wanting that. Maybe the placard version of that is you have a piece of paper at the base of the route or a whiteboard that various gyms do in different ways, where you are just asked to rate the difficulty of the climb relative to the climb on either side of it. That might be an analog way to collect that data, but that's basically the premise. Just instead of asking people to give their grade and then coming up with a consensus, you instead just ask people to rate the climb's difficulty relative to other climbs. Boom. There's my system. It's free to use, open source. Well, it won't be open source because I try to make money from it. But there's my free idea. Somebody make it.